I quote, "The government of Portugal, in view of its own statement, not to allow foreign mercenaries to use Angola as a base of operation for interfering in the domestic affairs of the Democratic Republic of the Congo," unquote. Having regard, Mr. President, to this history of foreign interference, a history of continuing and persistent intervention from without, since the independence of that country, it is quite understandable that we should have listened with much concern and preoccupation to the statement just made by the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As it has always done in the past, my country hastens to declare its solidarity with the sister African nation, victim once again of foreign machinations and interference. The serious development that the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of the Congo has brought to our attention today is but part of a greater offensive launched by the enemies of African independence. The latest manifestations of intervention and subversion are the continuation of that same action which the United Nations has repeatedly condemned and with which the United Nations has continually sought to cope. Today, once again, the evidence of interference and subversion in the Congo is at the doorstep of Portugal. The launching pad for these activities is, of course, Angola, a territory under Portuguese control. The evidence is there for all to see, as those who are engaging in these acts of international banditry have made little effort to hide their hideous deeds from the international community or the world press. The usually authoritative New York Times of Saturday, November 4, 1967, had this to say in its editorial columns with regard to the activities and preparations of white mercenaries on Portuguese-controlled territories, and I quote, "Portugal denies that the mercenary force came from Angola, but the United States and other Western governments have been accumulating evidence for weeks of its presence there. Washington was right to emphasize strongly to Portugal its grave disquiet over this development." Again, the New York Times went on to say, "The thrust from Angola into Katanga is evidently linked to the presence in Bukavu of the forces led by the Belgian Colonel Jean Schramm. The ramifications of this latest development, if it is not checked quickly, could be very dangerous. Many Africans are convinced that the white minority regimes in South Africa, Rhodesia, and the Portuguese territories have been planning a power move against hostile African governments to the north. They believe the invasion of the Congo represents a first step in that strategy," unquote. This telling and informative analysis, Mr. President, was followed by a report on Sunday, November 5, 1967, in which the New York Times said in part, and I quote, "Lisbon was seen as becoming increasingly the center for traffic of arms and mercenaries. The Lisbon airport is the jump-off point for what has developed into a regular airlift to the Portuguese territory of Angola. The cargoes are a mixed bag of people and arms from various sources," unquote. The Congolese minister, in his letter of 3 November 1967 to the President of the Security Council, requesting an urgent meeting of the Council, states that, and I quote, "An armed band of mercenaries invaded the territory of the Democratic Republic of the Congo at Kiserje. They went to Kasaji, where they seized the truck motorcar, and they are now approaching Kalwezi," unquote. The foreign minister went on to say that this band occupied Mutshatsa at 1 p.m. local time on the 2nd of November. Mr. President, as is to be expected, The Portuguese government has, of course, characteristically denied that it has ever been responsible for such activities. But the statement made today by its representative is as convincing, I'm afraid, as other Portuguese declarations in this regard. There is one thing that cannot be denied. These activities take place, and if they do take place, such activities cannot simply come from out of thin air. On the contrary, it is clearly obvious that operations of the magnitude and the character that have been launched from Angola against the Congo Democratic Republic through the instrumentality of mercenaries could not have taken place without the knowledge and I would even say the tolerance of the Portuguese authorities. That much the international community at large must recognize. To us, and surely to all impartial observers, Mr. President, Portuguese complicity in organizing such operations must be all too evident. Subversive operations carried out by mercenaries with the overt and covert assistance of the twin alliance of colonialism and racism has increasingly become a source of concern to African governments. The long-term consequences of this offensive, launched through the instrumentality of nameless and faceless soldiers of fortune, a method clearly designed to denationalize intervention, have recently been examined by African governments at the highest level. The Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the OAU, which met last September in the capital city of the Congo Republic, addressing itself to the problem posed by mercenary activities, considered all such activities as a serious threat to the security of African states and the continued presence of mercenaries as a danger that, and I quote, inevitably arouses strong and destructive feelings and puts in jeopardy the lives of foreigners in the continent, unquote. The Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the OAU also condemned the aggression of mercenaries against the Democratic Republic of the Congo and called inter alia upon the United Nations to deplore and take, and I quote, immediate action to eradicate such illegal and immoral practices, and appealed urgently to, I quote, all states of the world to enact laws declaring the recruitment and training of mercenaries in their territories as a punishable crime and deterring their citizens from enlisting as mercenaries, unquote. Mr. President, my delegation would like to seize this opportunity to request the Council to agree in this respect with the assessment of African governments, the pertinent parts of which I have just quoted, and to condemn the activities of Portugal and its allies of oppression in Africa. I would also like to submit to the Council that it should examine the broad implications of mercenary activities and their possible effect on race relations in Africa and take appropriate action to prevent their repetition. We cannot, however, let this occasion pass without reminding the Council once again of the fact that the problem of mercenary activities is only a ramification of more fundamental problems in Southern Africa with which the United Nations has failed up to now to cope effectively. I have in mind, of course, apartheid in South Africa, the rebellion of the white settlers in Rhodesia, the usurpation of an international territory in Southwest Africa, and Portuguese colonialism. All these forces have now joined hands to frustrate United Nations decisions. Apparently, they all feel that they are threatened by the expanding horizon of African independence and cannot reconcile themselves with the equality and freedom that this independence implies. Thus, they want to sabotage and thwart that independence. In their effort in the Congo, they also enjoy the covert support of powerful business interests who see in a strong